Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the Solemnity of Ascension Thursday. 40 days after Easter, Jesus rose back to the right hand of the Father, or we say ascended. We use the word rose with the resurrection and ascend to the ascension, but they both mean the same thing. So, after the public ministry and the passion, death, and glorious resurrection of Jesus, Jesus was with the apostles and the disciples for 40 days in his risen, glorified body. And then on this day, he ascended back to the right hand of the Father. Today is the solemnity of the Ascension. What a beautiful kind of bittersweet for the apostles. All that Christ has taught them, and now they must rely on the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, to enlighten them and to inform them as the Church of Jesus Christ continues. And we do this all in his name, baptizing, preaching, witnessing to the love of God. Well, it's a wonderful day. Thank you for being with me during the presentations to the diaconate and to the priesthood. So we had a couple questions, and I would like to answer those questions now, if you don't mind, because sometimes it takes a little bit more than just like 3 sentences. So one of the questions that I received was, are deacons celibate? Are they to be celibate? Well, the transitional deacons are to be celibate, because remember that mode of the diaconate is going on to the priesthood. So they make a solemn promise of celibacy at the time of their ordination to the diaconate. They are the transitional deacons, those deacons going on to the priesthood. The permanent deacons, well, do they take a vow of celibacy? Some may, some may not. Those who are married do not take this, the promise of celibacy, but those who are single do. Isn't that interesting? So here I am, a layman studying for the permanent diaconate, and I'm getting ordained, but I'm not married. But when I am ordained, I will take a promise of celibacy, not to marry. And here I am, a man who is married, studying to be a deacon. I do not take a solemn vow or solemn promise of celibacy. So in both modalities of the diaconate, the transitional deacon who will go on to the priesthood, absolutely celibacy. The permanent deacon, well, it depends. Are they single? They will remain single and celibate. If they're married, they're married. If their wife dies, they remain celibate. They do not remarry. I hope that answers the question for the deacon. So it's those who are in the covenant of matrimony that stay in the covenant of matrimony, and they do not take a promise of celibacy. But everybody else would. At the time of the ordination, the transitional deacon will, and the time of the ordination, the permanent deacon who is single would, but the married deacon would not. The second question would be, I heard that there were deaconesses in the early church. Well, we do believe that they were deaconesses in the early church, but that word is not what we equate with what we understand to the diaconate. See, those women would help the deacons. So those women did not have the laying on of hands. They were not set aside for that ministry. So what did they do? Well, remember, when the adults were to be baptized, they were to undress and go into the water and come out of the water. And it was those women who, for a better use of the word, assistants to the deacons, I don't know, but they use deaconesses. See, that's why you have to be very careful what kind of word you use. Would help dress them in the white garment, would help dress them. So they were seen in the water, but they were not baptizing. these women were not deacons. They do not receive the power of the laying on of hands and the Holy Spirit setting them aside for the sacred duties of that order, the holy orders, the diaconate. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. Were there women back in the day that assisted the deacons? Absolutely. Were they closely associated with the deacons? Most definitely. Did they help with the sacraments? Yes. Because you're talking about adult men and adult women who were being baptized and brought into the church. So can we say that we have women who assist the priest and the deacons in the church today? Absolutely. Thank God. Because I couldn't do all this on my own. A lot of women help in the life of the church. Majority of my staff, all women. And I couldn't do it without them. I thank them every day for their generosity, of their yes to assist in the work of the church. The religious sisters back in the day, they ran our schools, our hospitals, and our missions. It was those women in the church that did wonderful things in the name of Christ. So I guess that word deaconesses, well, we don't use that today because it's confusing. But all of these women they're assistants to the priest in collaborating with them, collaborating with the priest and the deacons in the work of the church, in the name of Christ. Now, do they receive the sacrament of holy orders? Those women back in the early church? No, they did not. They did not receive the sacrament of holy orders. Did the presbyters or the bishops of the local church lay hands on them? No, they did not. But they recognized that the priests and the deacons and the bishop needed women to assist in the celebration of the sacrament and in various works. And one of those works was, of course, adult baptisms. And they were near the deacon and the priest, and they thought, oh, look at a deaconess. Now, that word might have stuck, but it's a word that is confusing, and that's why we don't use it today. We say lay ministers, don't we? Men and women who are extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. See, back in the day, they would see a lay woman who was an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. They probably would say, oh, look at a deaconess. But we would never use that word. They would see a catechist, a teacher who teaches prep or CCD. They would say, oh, look, a deaconess. Or they would see maybe women who work in the parish as parish social ministers, business managers, administrative assistants, working closely with deacons and priests. Oh, look at a deaconess. We would never use those words because it's confusing, because it's saying something that it's not. These women who work in the church today are phenomenal. Religious women, lay women who are single, lay women who are married, who live out their baptismal promises by doing the work of the church, phenomenal. But they have not received the sacrament of holy orders. They are exercising their baptismal promises. That's what they're doing. They're exercising their baptismal promises, and they're witnessing to Christ like they said on the day of their confirmation. So it's that baptism and confirmation, like today we're celebrating Ascension Thursday, to go out and preach the gospel. And as St. Francis says, if necessary, use words, So just hope that clears some of the confusion. So celibacy with deacons. Well, for the transitional deacons, yes, celibacy. For the permanent deacons, well, if the permanent deacon is not married, yes. But if the permanent deacon is married, like Deacon Don and Linda, absolutely not. No promise of celibacy there. Okay? And if the wife dies, they would not marry. So let's take a look at also deaconesses. Again, a review. In the early church, I think they did use that word. But remember, these women were not set aside to receive the sacrament of holy orders, because the sacrament of holy orders is imbued in the person of Christ, right? Christ as head and shepherd. And so the deacon, the priest, and the bishop stand in the person of Christ as head and shepherd. The deacon as a servant. Remember? Word, altar, charity. Remember we talked about that? The priest as the victim at the sacrifice, offering the Mass, the sacraments, preaching the gospel. The bishop, his role in the church is to oversee and govern the diocese, all the parishes, all the entities of the archdiocese or diocese, and to be the teacher and shepherd modeled after Christ. So those three modalities of holy orders of Christ is contained within the man, Jesus Christ, and God. And he gives that to these men who are going to be deacons, priests, or bishops, because they stand in his person. Again, another reason why the church does not ordain women to the diaconate. It's tied up into the sacrament of holy orders. But let me just tell you, I'm grateful for the Catholic women out there who do tremendous good from all those people that I mentioned earlier. And how about for the women who are just sitting in chapel in adoration? Thank you. Thank you. How about for the women who are raising their children by themselves? Thank you. How about for the moms who are homeschool moms and teaching the Catholic faith to their children? Thank you. Yes, women do a tremendous work in the church, and we are grateful. And I said, it's not a matter of like, oh, why can't they be, as if it's a functional thing. The priesthood is not functional. Here, I could give you a book and say, here, read this, and then just you'll say Mass, right? It's not a functional thing. We're talking about that the man himself that God has chosen stands in the person of Christ. They are fundamentally changed on an ontological level. That's a 50-cent word, ontological. Google that word tonight, ontological, beginning with the word letter O, ontological change that happens for the man. So it's not about function. Anybody could read the missal. Take this, all of you, and eat it. You could read. You could do. It's not about function. It's about the identity of the priest wrapped in the person of Jesus Christ. Remember I said if Jesus' name was Chrissy, it would probably be only women and not men. But because Jesus is the Christ and he is the Son of God, it's the men. Just like I don't feel neglected, or I don't feel like I'm not upset with God because I can't have a baby. No, women have babies. We're not wired for that. In a physical way, and may I say in a spiritual way. There's a connectedness. That gift is there should be a complementary of the sexes, not a fight about it. So I hope those answers would help those questions. And hey, listen, the administrator of the YouTube, she does a great job. She's a woman, and she gives me these questions, and I'm grateful for them, and I'll answer them for you. I wanted to show you a picture of me meeting Pope John Paul II. Isn't that lovely? Oh, I had a wonderful time. I met Pope John Paul II, or should I say Pope St. John Paul II, after a couple years after ordination. And there I am with a couple of my priest friends. And we had the opportunity to go to the chapel in the Vatican the Pope's chapel and celebrate Mass with him, celebrate Mass with him. And do you believe it? I proclaimed the gospel that day. One of the monsignors at the Vatican said to the group, who's going to read the gospel? And one of these priests, let me see if I could point him out, this one, pointed to me and said, he will do it, he's the loudest. Well, that's true, but I don't know if that's the reason why I should be the one who proclaims the gospel to the Pope. But I thought, oh Lord, have mercy. I'm going to be proclaiming the gospel to the successor of St. Peter, the vicar of Christ on earth. So we walked into the chapel. There was John Paul sitting down at his prie-dieu, the kneeler and the chair in front of the altar, just praying. His breviary, his office book, beautiful. We walked in, we just sat down quietly. He got vested for Mass. Mass began. And when it came time to proclaim the gospel, I proclaimed the gospel. It was the gospel of the sower and the seed. It was that long gospel. And I thought, Lord, have mercy. I hope I don't make any mistakes. And I hope I do this well. Well, praise be to God, everything was fine. But it was an honor. Well, this picture is after Mass. So we go into his library and he hands us a rosary. A rosary in a little pouch. And we're so grateful. We told the Holy Father that we're from Philadelphia. And he says, oh, Philadelphia, it's a big city and or big archdiocese. And we smiled and nodded our heads, and he just greeted everyone. When you're with the Holy Father, you don't even know what to say. You just are in all of the presence. So you're just so grateful. So that's after Mass, meeting him personally in his study. So I could say I met a saint. I met a saint and I talked to a saint. And a saint gave me a pair of rosaries. So I was so happy about that. So that's me. I think it's a 1992 or 1993. I want to say 93 that I met the Holy, yes, because it was January. It just turned into 93. That's it. Because it was on the feast, or should I say the memorial of Angela Merici. And it was in the end of January. And we met the Holy Father. I was over there, I guess for vacation, so to speak, and my priest friends, we all went together. So we had a wonderful time. That was my meeting with Pope St. John Paul II. Isn't that nice? I have another picture for you. My brother's not in this picture. This is a picture of my mom and, oh, there's the coffee pot. Hello. Here's a picture of my mom and my dad and my sister Denise. Now my brother Salvatore is not in this picture. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'll give you a picture of him another time. He was not here at the time this picture was taken. This was taken at St. Martin of Tours Parish in Northeast Philadelphia, where I served as a deacon. I went back after ordination to the priesthood to celebrate Mass. And then they had a reception for me in the hall. See, I talked about the hall before. It's just a nice place just to gather with people. So here's my mom. Her name is Angelina. We call her Angie. My dad, Lou. I'm there named after my dad, Louis, and my sister, Denise. And my brother name is Salvatore. So here we are at St. Martin of Tours in the hall after Mass. Now, do you notice I'm wearing a rose on my lapel? Can you see that? Well, it was so funny. So I'll tell you the story about that. So after ordination, I was praying a novena to St. Therese of the Little Flower. So I'm praying this novena for a special intention. It comes to the last day of the novena, and I arrive at the rectory. And I go through the back door, the kitchen door, and the housekeeper, Anna O'Flaherty, a nice Irish lady. Glory be now, Anna O'Flaherty. So she answered the door. I said, Anna. She goes, oh, glory be, Father. She said, because I was a deacon there. Father, welcome. I have to give you something. Someone dropped off something for you. I said, really, Anna? She goes, absolutely. It's in the refrigerator. I thought, oh, it's in the refrigerator. Very nice. So she comes out with the plastic container that flowers and corsages and boutonnieres are in. And she goes, Father, look at this. Someone gave you a rose. And I said, Anna, you will not believe this. I said, I just finished my novena to the little flower. And I got the rose. She, absolutely, Father. I told no one, not even my parents, that I was praying a novena to the little flower. I go into that rectory, the housekeeper immediately goes into the refrigerator, hands me the rose and says, so I said, Anna, who dropped this off for me? Wouldn't give the name, Father. She would not give me her name. She just said, give this to Father. He's coming today. He's coming back to celebrate Mass for the people of St. Martin de Tours. Give him that. So when after Mass, I put the rose on my lapel before I went into the hall, thinking that she's saying, I'm the one who gave you that. Nothing. Isn't that how Therese works? Therese will just drop the rose and leave. That is what happened. That is what happened to me after my novena. Just a rose appeared. It was given to me just as Therese was smiling. And I'm sure Therese kissed me on the cheek and said, Father, this is for you. Everything's okay. So there are the two pictures I wanted to share with you today as I just talked to you about some of the questions that we received. I want to tell you about my trip to Rome when I was a newly ordained priest, and also as a newly ordained priest, going back to my deacon assignment, right, and offering Mass for them. But the beautiful Saint Therese, the little flower, gave me a rose after I was finished the 9-day novena to her. Well, everyone, I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a nice day.